Today I'd like to take a look at 3 games that all use their time effectively in different ways. When deciding on the games, I wanted to stray away from time manipulation, as that's much different than just a standard time system and has much more obvious implications. Meaning Braid and Prince of Persia were not considered here. Of course, those games are great examples of time manipulation though. So before we get into the video, I'm going to go ahead and plug my previous one, where I talked about how Resident Evil 4 is so much fun, and how that makes it such a classic. So you should check it out. Alright, well anyway, let's get into it. Dead Rising was released in 2006 by Capcom and was directed by Keiji. My reputation will never be the same after Mighty No. 9 and Inafune. Unlike Mighty No. 9, however, Dead Rising is a game that I think is amazing. I don't think the first Dead Rising is talked about nearly enough. It obviously has its issues. Having side quests that consist entirely of escort missions, while the AI you're escorting in these missions are as intelligent as a shovel and walk about as fast as a shovel. Despite this, Dead Rising did so much well, even more so impressively for being a 360 launch title. You're Frank West, a photojournalist tasked with one mission: discover the truth behind the Willamette zombie outbreak before your helicopter arrives in 3 days. For this list, I had 2 pretty obvious choices given the title of the video, and Dead Rising was one of them. The other was Majora's Mask, but everyone talks about Zelda, so it's time to talk about Dead Rising. Dead Rising is made almost unique with its time system and how it affects gameplay. Dead Rising is a game that doesn't take the player on a traditional progression path. It was designed around the fact that you will most likely never be able to complete the game on your first few tries. So when you die, you have the option to restart the game with your current level. While some may cynically look at this aspect of the game and just see it as them not being able to balance the game correctly, I think it's a really fun idea. The game is entirely focused around this concept. It's so integral to what makes Dead Rising so unique. Do I want these limiting time factors in every game? Of course not. But Dead Rising pulls it off well to create this certain tenseness to everything you do. It's a game that demands you plan out everything if you want to do everything. Its progression is tied to this limited time. You're probably going to restart the game a few times, but you'll be powered up, slowly learning your way in and out of the mall. Dead Rising has a pretty big sandbox, but it's a Yakuza type of sandbox. You know, the type that's only moderately sized but so much more memorable because there isn't any filler. Every part of the mall is designed to be so iconic and unique in a way to be memorable. And these areas will need to be memorable, as you'll be needing to travel in and out of them all the time for various missions and general exploration. The time is just that final push that tells you that you need to learn the way this world works, and you need to get your timings figured out if you want any chance of succeeding. Removing the pressure removes the tension, which removes some of what makes Dead Rising fun and unique. It's a really gamey mechanic that's only really there for the purpose of gameplay. It doesn't make sense that Frank is secretly an immortal being that becomes stronger every time he comes back. It's just the way the game was designed to be fun. I know the time limit turns a lot of people off of Dead Rising, but I think it's a case of something you need to get used to. Dead Rising doesn't conform itself to the player's needs, it makes you bend to its needs. Having a sort of schedule and set time that the game is based upon is not something often seen in games. You can't really speedrun the campaign of Dead Rising because it will end at this certain time, with no exceptions granted. It's all about how you use your time leading up to the end that matters. Of course, I get that some people just don't like the time system, but I think it's part of what makes Dead Rising such a great game, and the absence of such a mechanic in Dead Rising 4, amongst other things, made that game horrendous. Take a look at this gameplay of saving 2 survivors. I know I showed a bad clip of the AI earlier, but while moments like this are frustrating, I think they can be fun. You can practically hear my foot tapping with impatience. I can feel the clock ticking down while these 2 foreigners ponder if they can trust me. Very rarely can a game be made annoying or bad on purpose and really get away with it, but it really works here. Persona 4 was released in 2007 and was developed and published by Atlus, and is a game near and dear to my heart. I could talk endlessly about P4 and the Persona franchise overall. I could have put Persona 3, 4, or 5 here, so why did I choose 4? Well, obviously those 3 games all use the same basic layout for how this time system works out, but P4 had those extra special moments to me. So how does P4 use its time effectively? Well, it's not something that's really easily seen, I think. Persona 4 is a game that greatly benefits from the time you spend within it, and I don't mean your 70-hour save file, but the time passing within the game. Persona 4 is a story that needs to be experienced in an interactive format such as this to really be felt to the degree that you do when playing the game. Persona 4 is a simulation. Yu Narukami is not the main character, you are. The game uses its day-to-day time system along with its time-of-the-day based activities, all to serve the purpose of putting you into the shoes of a student in Japan. So as living as a student in Inaba, you go day by day, where most days are yours to decide on what you do next. Persona 4 allows you to craft a story that's kinda unique to you. P4 uses its day-to-day time mechanics to draw you into the world. You live in this world, you have to balance your friends, study for school, read, eat, become more likable, and finally make time to save people thrown into the TV world. All of these options are overwhelming, and while they continue to be overwhelming, unless you use a guide to figure out exactly what needs to be done on specific days to min-max everything. And feeling overwhelmed really works here. The time is so excellent to put yourself into the main character's shoes. Real life is overwhelming, especially nowadays where there's so much to do at any given time in your life. Everything I said here still applies to Persona 3, 4, or 5, right? And that's true, but now let's look at how P4 uses its time to deliver emotional moments within the game. I'm going to be pointing at a few endgame spoilery sections of Persona 4, so warning, this will include spoilers for the end of the game. If you are planning to play P4 or are playing P4 and don't know who the killer is, I'll leave something in the description to skip ahead. Yeah. Anyways, a moment I'd like to look at is the time where Nanako and Dojima are in the hospital. After saving your niece from the TV world, after your uncle gets into a terrible car crash, they're at the hospital. You come home and no one's home. The music has gone from this to this. It feels so empty. Well, how does this relate to time? Well, every day you come home and someone greets you. There's never a time where someone is not home before this. You come home and you don't get that greeting. You don't come home and see your niece watching TV or your uncle sitting down after a long day at work. You go from this.
Welcome home.
You're back.
Welcome home, big bro.
To this. It's subtle things like this that can really hit you. Not to be dramatic or depressing, but a few months ago, my dog that I had most of my life passed away. Coming home and not seeing the same thing you've seen every day not be there is hard. And P4 uses its time well to really put you in that position. It spends the entirety of the game prior to this to set you up for that. It's really brilliant. This aspect of Persona 4 is often why I point to the anime not being truly representative of what Persona 4 is. It could never possibly put you in the same spot of experiencing day-to-day life as the main character. Another spot where Persona 4's story uniquely works with the plot to make it your own is something that's never really quantified or talked about in-game, but it's the idea of how many days you took to rescue each person. I'd be willing to bet that how quickly you rescued someone was based on how much you enjoyed them as a character. I'd also be willing to bet that the average amount of days to rescue Nanako is noticeably lower than everyone else's. You feel those stakes. You want to run to the TV world, catch the killer, and save Nanako immediately. It's also another subtle thing, but isn't that what's so great? Subtlety is something often not felt in games. The good Silent Hills are subtle, and all those subtle details add to the whole of what they are. And Persona 4 is no different. Papers, Please was released in 2013 by Lucas Pope. Your sole task is to process people through a border and keep the bills up at home. Dead Rising was a game that used its time mainly for the purpose of gameplay, and P4 mainly used it for the sake of immersion and story, but in Papers, Please, it seamlessly combines these two concepts into one. You play as a border booth worker, going through the monotony that comes with a job. It should be noted that Papers, Please did set out to combine its gameplay and story, and a large part of that comes with the timing and monotony that the game can have. Papers, Please is you working a job. You have a certain amount of time every day to process as many people as you can. You get fined after making more than 2 mistakes, and getting fined matters because you have a whole family at home depending on you. Papers, Please is a game that allows for a very unique story to be told, all from the perspective of this worker. You're presented many different offers, get involved with things that you can't quite grasp the scope of yet. Your customers are all regular people. You get presented with some strange, true moral choices throughout the game. So let's say someone comes up without a certain document I know they need. I can outright deny them, or I can tell them what's missing and the chance that they genuinely just forgot to give it to me. However, is this random person you'll never see again worth your family? Do you want your family to be cold, starving, or even homeless? Do you help this honest-seeming couple pass through the border, knowing that incorrectly passing them through means you don't get paid for your starving family? Have you not been processing enough people in time? Well, how about accept this suggestion of detaining more people for the sake of a higher paycheck? While I could go off listing all the scenarios possible aloud, I think you get the point. You constantly get new criteria for entry, each more and more tedious to look for. The game is constantly pressuring you with the timing. It's forcing you to make a decision between your family or these random people you meet every day. If you're worried, you may cut corners to speed up the job. The time constantly pressures you to move quickly, think quickly, do everything quickly. Every small moral choice you make every day is going to be tied to how much money you need, and that's based on how much time you have. Papers, Please is one of the few games that truly crack the code on how to expertly cross gameplay with story in an organic way. Few games attempt this, and even fewer succeed. Hello, and thanks for making it to the end of the video. I just want to plug my previous video again, so it's a video about Resident Evil 4 and why it's so great. You should definitely check it out. I also have a video on Sonic the Hedgehog coming in the near future, so make sure to subscribe and share with some friends if you enjoyed the video. Thanks again, and have a good one.